Shalom, beloveds of the King. Praise Abba Yahuwah. Here we are today on this beautiful day here in Jerusalem, where I happen to be sitting in a very significant place. We are here at the very bema seat where Yahushua was arrested, where he was condemned. And I'm sitting outside here in the old city, outside the city gates, outside where there would have been the city gates at the bema seat. And interesting how this is the place that the Father got me to come and sit, and this is where I'm going to do the Torah portion for today. And this Torah portion is called Vayeshev. Vayeshev, to be continued living. And so this is the Torah portion from Genesis 37 verse 1 to Genesis 40 verse 23. And we are going to have a look at this very significant Torah portion, as the Father really has opened up this Torah portion to me to make me understand especially what he's saying to us. And you know, being in the land, being in Jerusalem at this very time of doing the Torah portion on the Shabbat, it's just, and at the same time there was just a group of youngsters walking past, you know, singing, and there is a lot going on. But if you sit where I'm sitting, it's just the debris, the filth, the alcohol bottles, everything that is surrounding me in this place, because obviously this is a place where people come and sit and they can, you know, drink and maybe even have a barbecue, a braai. But today it is a day where I can sit here and be able to bring this Torah portion, Vayeshev, and what the Father wants to say to us in this day. So let us pray. Abba Yahuwah, I just want to thank you. I thank you for the privilege that we have, and that I have, and Elsie right now, to be able to be in your land. And Father, more than ever I understand this is the promised land. This is not the holy land. It's far from holy, but it is your promised land, and it is a land that has been promised to us for those who are obedient, for those that are going to walk in your ways, for those who are truly seeking your face, for those that are walking out to your statutes, for those, like when you called the Israelites out of Egypt and you are bringing them into a promised land. This is a promised land. You brought them out of Egypt and they had to go through a wilderness, and we are in our wilderness experience for you to be able to bring us into this promised land. And so, Abba Yahuwah, I just want to thank you. I thank you for the privilege that I have of being able to be here and doing these Torah portions while I'm here, and actually being able to live out these Torah portions, as even today, as I was just meditating on this Torah portion with Joseph, and understanding how he is a symbol of Yahushua, our Messiah, and how we need to be able to become set apart, and knowing, like Yahushua he was called, he had a purpose, he had a plan, he was ordained, he came to this earth with a purpose. And so we too have a purpose, but we need to understand that we are also going to have to be persecuted. We are going to be ridiculed. We are going to maybe be sold out. But at the same time, we are still those that are going to be able to stand no matter what, just like Joseph had to stand, because you had a purpose and you had a plan for Joseph. And so we are going to look at Genesis chapter 37, and we are going to read from verse 2. This is the genealogy of Yaakov. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and feeding the flock with his brothers, and the young man was with sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought an evil report of them to his father. And so we must be so careful, because at times, even if it's the truth of whatever it was that he was saying, he was not to be bringing an evil report on his brothers. And then this is also part and parcel why his brothers also didn't like him, because to a certain extent Joseph would tattletale on his brothers. And so we've got to be very careful in how we handle ourselves. But Joseph was young. He was only 17, and he was definitely his father's favorite. And obviously his father had seen that there was anointing on Joseph's life, and the father was going to choose Joseph. And so in verse 3 it says, Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a long robe. And so this robe is really what we can see. This was a cloak of authority that was being given to Joseph. But this very cloak of authority, his father had raised him up. His father saw he was not only the son of his old age, but in some way Yaakov could discern that there was going to be a special anointing upon this son of his. And so this cloak was the cloak of authority that was being given to Joseph, because Joseph was going to be set apart by his father. But just like he was given the special cloak of authority, that was his earthly authority, he was going to have to be stripped, just like Messiah Yahushua. Now we're going to see the similarity throughout this next couple of Torah portions as we're going to read the rest of the chapters, finishing Genesis. We are going to see how Joseph is going to be a shadow of Messiah Yahushua. And so we are going to look at the life of Joseph, and as we look at the life of Joseph, it's going to be able to tie in with the life of Messiah Yahushua. And so Israel loved Joseph more than his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a long robe. But when his brothers saw this, their father loved him more than all his brothers. They hated him and were not able to speak peaceably to him. And then Joseph dreamed a dream and told his brothers, so they hated him even more. Sometimes the Father will give us revelation, and sometimes the Father shares things with us, but it's not always for us to share with people, because unfortunately we're living in a world where people they're jealous. And we saw that's the spirit of Cain. Cain was jealous of Abel, but yet the father Abba Yahuwah gave Abel favor because he offered him the right sacrifice. And so would Cain have received the same blessing if he would have just done what was right in his eyes. And so he saw two dreams, and in both these dreams, these are the dreams that he's seeing that has to do with his future. And so this is the dreams that he's seeing, how the sun, moon, and stars are going to bow down to him. And he's also going to have he's going to see the dream of the sheaves that are going to bow down to him. And so these are all, it was going to be, Father was showing Joseph, in his dream, Joseph was going to raise up, he's going to be a prophet, he's going to be a prophetic, a man that has not only got a prophetic mantle on his life, but he's going to carry Abba Yahuwah's authority in the time ahead. And so he has the dream of the sheaves, and then he dreamt another dream that he sees sun, moon, and stars where they bow down to him, and the sheaves that they bow down to him. And this made the brothers even more angry, because now who does he think he is, that now all of them are going to bow down to him? But the brothers are going to have to know about these dreams, because the time is going to come in the chapters ahead that we are going to see that this is going to play out. And so verses 18 from chapter 37, verses 18, it says, and they saw him from a distance. So now he's going to go, his father sends him to go and see how his brothers are, and he's going to go take them food. And they saw him from a distance and plotted. He came near them, and they plotted against him to kill him. So is this not exactly what the brother Judah, Yahushua himself, who comes from the line of Judah, and his own brothers, how these Pharisees and Sadducees were plotting to kill him? So this is why we must understand it's those from our own house that are going to want to plot against us in order to be able to kill us. Because at the end of the day, this is exactly what happened to Messiah Yahushua, and this is exactly what happened to Joseph, who is a foreshadow of Messiah. And then we get to verse 23, and it says, so it came to be that when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his robe, the long robe which was on him. And this was the robe that his father had made for him, the robe that his father has given him, and now they're stripping him from this authority that has been given. I'm saying an authority, I'm using this as an example, because Messiah Yahushua came from heaven with a heavenly authority, an authority that was given to him, but he has to be stripped. He had to be stripped of the mantle that was on him. And so Joseph was going to carry this earthly authority, and his father had given him an heavenly mantle, but this was going to have to be stripped from him as well. And so too, that when there is a prophet, listen to what it says in verse 24, and they took him and they threw him into a pit, and the pit was empty, there was no water in it. And so the pit is normally very symbolic of a prophet in training, because a prophet is going to have to come very low, even though the Father gives a prophet much authority, where they walk with an authority that the Father gives them in order to be able to bring judgment against nations, bring judgments against kings, and much authority that is given to a prophet. But before the prophet can really walk in that authority, the prophet needs to be stripped of that, of all earthly authority, and earthly, being tied to earthly things, and be stripped from any earthly mantle, and being able to be given a heavenly mantle that needs to be given them, so that they can walk in an authority that comes only from Abba Yahuwah on the earth. And so Joseph is now, we look at verse 26, and Yehudah said to his brothers, what would we gain if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let no other hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our flesh. And his brothers listened. And the men Midianite traders passed by, so they pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they took Joseph to Mitzrayim. So 20 is really a number of being tested and tried, and Joseph is going to be tested and tried. Yahushua was sold for 30 pieces of silver. Joseph was sold for 20 pieces of silver. And so we see that his own brothers are going to sell him out. And who is it that comes and sells Messiah out? Is it not the priests from his own tribe that comes and sells him out? And, he is given over and sold out. And so we understand that even now, in the land of Israel, where I sit right now, Judah has a right to be here. But those of the sons of Israel, which is what Joseph is going to represent, from Joseph is going to come the line that's going to make up the 10 tribes, that's going to make up the lost tribes of the sons of Ephraim, where it's going to be Judah and Israel, and Joseph is going to be standing for Israel, and yet Joseph is going to be the one sold out by the brother Judah. And still today, brother Judah does not want to allow the lost tribes of the house of Israel into the land, because the jealousy of the fact that we received Messiah Yahushua. And so if you are of Judah that you deny Messiah Yahushua and you have not received Messiah Yahushua, you are welcome, if you are a Jew, to be able to return back to the land. But the minute you are having to be able to stand for Messiah, you are not welcome. You will be ostracized. You will be thrown out of this land because they don't want you here. And so even the believers in the land, it's not easy for them, because even though they're free to practice their religion, but yet it's not easy. I know that a few years ago, at King of Kings, there was a lot of people that came out of a service that was stabbed with bottles and everything by a group of radical, what can you say, the Orthodox Jews, a sect of them that decided to stab them and hit them. And so, you know, it is not that easy. And it's definitely not easy for you to just think that you can come and preach here, because it's seen as proselyting, and you can be put in jail for that in this land. And so in verse 36, we have a look, and it says, and the Midianites had sold him into Mitzrayim to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard. And so Joseph is sold to Potiphar. And so here we see that Ephraim is the house that is going to be sold out. And they are the ones that are going to be in the dispersion. They are the ones that are going to be coming out of Mitzrayim. They are the ones that are going to go into the world. They are the ones that are going to lose their way. And where Judah is still going to stay faithful to the Father to a certain extent, they have stayed faithful to Torah to a degree, because the religion has very much killed everything that is there as well, even though they're faithful to be able to keep the Torah, but they've added many things to Torah that goes absolutely against the word of Yahuwah. And so Joseph is the one who's going to go into the nations, and he's going into Mitzrayim, and from there is going to come forth his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, that are going to become part of the sons of Jacob, of Israel. And so we see how his brothers have sold him out. And so if we go look at Matthew chapter 10, verses 21. So if we go to Matthew chapter 10. So if we go to Matthew chapter 10 and we go to verse 21, and it says, and the brother shall deliver up brother to death, and brother shall deliver up brother to death, and father his child, and children shall rise up against parents, and shall put them to death. And so we must understand that brother is going to turn against brother in the last days. Matthew chapter 24 says the same thing. And you shall be hated by all for my name's sake, but he who has endured to the end shall be saved. So it's the same as what it says in Matthew chapter 24, that brother will turn against brother, and you shall be hated for my name's sake, but he who has endured to the end shall be saved. And so if we have a look at verses 33 to 40, and it says, but whoever shall deny me before men, him I shall deny before my Father who is in the heavens. Do not think that I have come to bring peace on the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to bring division, and a man against his father, and a daughter against his mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemies are those of his own house. So we should not be surprised when we are being persecuted, and when we have got those of our own family, even if it's not in your own family, your own brother or sister, but even those in your own family, part of your church, and that will then be able to come up against you and persecute you and sell you out. Just especially when you don't agree and you don't walk as they walk and you don't believe what they believe. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take up his stake and follow after me is not worthy of me. And he who has found his life shall lose it, but he that has lost his life for my sake shall find it. He who receives me, and he who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. And so here we see how there's going to be, just like now, brother has turned against brother, and they are selling him out, and this is exactly what is going to happen. And so we see, if we have a look in verse 37, if we have a look, so when we go to verse chapter 38, we're going to go a little bit more into chapter 38. And so we understand from this scripture in chapter 37 where brother is going to turn against brother. And so we know that in this land of Israel where we dwell right now, this is exactly what it is. There is division going on at the moment. There's going to be those that are secular that are coming up against the religious Jews. In the religious Jews, we've got the problem going on over here where we've got the Jews standing up against the Arabs. So there is a lot of division. And so we've got to understand that what was very interesting to me is that we're going to look at the next chapter, that even we'll look at chapter 39, that I'll go into a little bit more detail with that. So we look at chapter 38, and in the chapter 38 is like a story that is in the middle of nowhere. Like we are looking at Joseph, and all of a sudden it starts to talk about Judah, and how Judah is going to take himself he's going to take a daughter of the Canaanites, whose name was Shuvah, and he took her and went into her. So they should have known, Judah should have known, Israel should have taught them, and we know that even with Abraham married a sister, and then we see Isaac going to fetch a wife from the family where he marries Rebecca, that stays in the bloodline. And then we get Judah now all of a sudden that is going to take a Canaanite wife, and this made no sense to me, and this has never made sense to me. Why this is in the middle of nowhere, you're going to see this story. And so this is about Judah going to be able to take this wife, and then she conceives and she bears a son called Er. And in verses 7, we are going to see she bears 3 sons. She's going to have Er, she's going to have Onan, and she's going to have Shelah. So she bears 3 sons. And Er, Judah's firstborn, was evil in the eyes of Yahuwah, and Yahuwah took his life. So understand. Here we see how Father will take a life of one who is going to be evil. If we're going to continue to be evil in the eyes of the Father, do we seem to think that we're going to be spared of everything? In those days they were not spared. Now we have the blood of Yeshua. We have the blood of Yeshua that is going to be able to give us the grace and the mercy in the time that we're in. And then in verse 10, we see that it says, but he dies. And then in verse 9 it says, and Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, because then he gets given to Tamar. So Tamar was the wife of Er, and he gets given to Tamar. And then once Er dies, Tamar gets given to Onan, but Onan knew that the offspring would be for his brother and not for him. And it came to be that when he went into his brother's wife, that he spilt on the ground lest he should give an offspring to his brother. And so at the end of the day, this was then in verse 10, but what he did displeased Yahuwah, so he took his life too. So the next thing, the father also took his life. And so then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah is grown, for he said, lest he also die as his brothers did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. But in the meantime, Judah decides not to give his son Shelah to Tamar, and Tamar now stays a widow. But Tamar decides one day on the road where she knows her father-in-law is going. So in verse 14, and she took off her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat at the entrance to Enyim, which was on the way to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as a wife. And Judah saw her, and reckoned her for a whore, for she had covered her face. So understand, here we see the whoring of Judah. And still today, it is known that the men of Judah, these religious Jews, many of them take Russian prostitutes, and many of them sleep with prostitutes. As long as they don't sleep with one of their own, they are okay. The Talmud allows them to sleep with a prostitute. And so she sleeps with him, and then he cannot pay her, And so she asks him for a pledge, and she asks him, I want your seal, your cord, your staff, that is in your hand. And he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. And so the ring is the seal, it's the covenant and authority. And so this was going to be the covenant and the authority that is coming from the house of Judah. And understand, this is from the bloodline of Tamar is going to come the Messiah. And then it's the cord. It can't be broken. It can't be, the cord that cannot be broken. And then the staff, the rod, the branch, Yahushua, from her is going to come the staff, the cord, and he's going to judge. It's a staff to judge, to guide, and it's also a symbol of leadership. And so we're going to understand that from Yahushua is going to come this branch, is going to come this rod, is going to come the staff that is going to come. And so Tamar falls pregnant, and she's going to eventually, when she falls pregnant, then Judah wants to have her stoned because of the fact that she's fallen pregnant. But at the end of the day, she then presents him the staff, the cord, and the seal. And then in verse 26, he says, and Judah examined and said, she has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shelah my son, and he never knew her again. But in the meantime, she gives birth to twins, and the eldest puts his hand out first, which is going to be Zerah, but then Peretz is going to come out. So he's actually the youngest, but he's the one that comes out first. And what's interesting in Matthew chapter 1, you are going to get the bloodline that's going to come from Yahushua, and it's going to come through Tamar, and it's going to come through the bloodline of Peretz. And when I was reading this, I found this very interesting this morning, because what was interesting to me is the fact that, isn't it interesting that the father did not allow that from the bloodline of Judah, with the union of Sheva, he did not allow out of those three sons to come an offspring that was going to come in the bloodline, that was going to come the Messiah from that bloodline. The Messiah was not going to come from the bloodline of the Canaanite woman. And I am almost 100% sure that it doesn't tell you in the Bible, but I can be, because he went and picked a wife for his son. And Tamar must have been a righteous woman that would have come from the house of Israel and not a Canaanite woman. Because he went and picked a wife for his son. And not like him, that just went and take any woman, a Canaanite woman, and went and slept with her. And Judah went and actually found a wife for his son Er. And that is what made me realize that I am almost sure that there wasn't going to be that bloodline, because the father wasn't going to allow Esau. Esau took the Canaanite women, and they were not to have joined with a foreign woman. And if we look at Ruth was going to be a Moabite, but she said to her mother-in-law that your people will be my people and your Yah will be my Yah. So she took on the ways of the Hebrew people. And so when we get to chapter 39, Peretz, the name Peretz means breach, burst forth, breakthrough, and that is what Yahushua is going to bring. He's going to bring the bridging of the two houses that were divided. He's going to be the bridge to bring the houses together from Joseph and Judah, Joseph's tribe and Judah's tribe, that's going to finally become one house from Yahushua himself. And he's going to bring the breakthrough that we're going to need in order to break loose from the bondage of us having been in Mitzrayim. And then if we're going to look at chapter 39, and it came to be that Yahuwah, so in verse 39, we're going to look at from verse 1, and it says, and Yosef had been taken down to Mitzrayim, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, a Mitzrayim, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. And so isn't it interesting? The Ishmaelites were now the half-brothers, because Ishmael was a brother. He was a brother that came, he was a brother from Abraham. He came from the brothers there of Abraham. He was a son of Abraham. So it would have been the half-brothers. And his own brothers, his own flesh and blood brothers sold him out. So at the end of the day, Yahushua is going to have to be denied by all the nations for him to be able to come and gather them all. And so, in verse 2 it says, and it came to be that Yahuwah was with Joseph, and he became a prosperous man, and was in the house of the master of the Mitzrayim. And his master saw that Yahuwah was with him, and that Yahuwah made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph walked in the Father's favor. And wherever he went, he was blessed, he had favor. And Joseph found favor in his eyes, and served him, and he appointed him over his whole house, and gave into his hand all that he had. And so here we see how Joseph was blessed. Joseph was blessed. He was blessed to have been in Potiphar's house, and we see that the Father's hand is upon him. That the Father's hand is upon him. And so we have a look and we see that, let's look at verse 8 and 9. But so now what happens, Joseph is now serving Potiphar. Joseph is enjoying serving Potiphar, but yet at the end of the day, now the enemy, whenever we are in a place where we are really walking with the Father, doing what the Father has got for us to do, there will always be an enemy that wants to come and destroy us. And now we see that Potiphar's wife comes and now starts to take a liking to Joseph, because he was a young man. He was a good-looking young man. He was attractive, and so she was attractive to him. And if we look and we see verses 8 and 9, it says, but he refused and said to his master's wife, look, my master does not know what it is with me in the house, and he has given me my hand all that he has. No one is great in this house than I, and he had not withheld whatever from me, but you, because you are his wife. And how shall I do this great evil and sin against Alua? And understand, she came after him constantly. And so in verse 10 it says, and it came to be as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not listen to her, to lie with her, to be with her. So he didn't just tempt her once. I mean, she didn't just tempt him once. She didn't just come and tempt him once. And that is made me see today, the enemy doesn't want to let up. The enemy is always going to be there to try and trip us up. And especially when we're walking with the Father. But understand, look at what was he had such a righteous walk, Joseph. Joseph was righteous before the Father. Even though Joseph lived in the land of Egypt, and he was a slave in Potiphar's house, but he was faithful to the Father and faithful to the Father's ways. And he says, and how shall I do this great evil and sin against Alua? So he wouldn't sin against Alua. It wasn't just sinning against his own body. It was sinning against Alua. It wasn't just sinning against his master. He understood that if he lay with Potiphar's wife, he would sin. But yet, how easy it is for us to sin. And we don't even understand that we don't sin against anybody other than the fact that we sin against the Father. And the fear of the Father should be upon us. And that's the way the fear of the Father was upon him. So when the enemy could not get him to fall, we see in verses 12 that she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. And it came to be that when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, see, he has brought into us a Hebrew to mock us. He came into me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it came to be, when he heard that I lifted my voice and I cried out that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside. And so when the enemy cannot get us to fall in the way that he wants to get us to fall, then he brings the accusations against us. So even if you are innocent, people will speak lies against you to destroy you. Yahushua told that Yahushua was told that he cast out demons in the spirit of Beelzebub. So he was also accused. And so do you understand? When we stand against the enemy, knowing what you stand for limits what you fall for. When he's standing for the Father and he will not sleep with her, then she has to find a way to come up against him. She has to find a way to get him to be able to be discredited, to bring accusations against him because he doesn't want to do what she wants. And so the enemy will gather stuff on you. The enemy gathers stuff on us, so that it looks like we're guilty. She now has his garment because he's run from her, not to commit adultery with her. And he does not want you to stand for what is right. So he will conjure up things against you. He will plot against you. He will scheme against you. He will bring accusations against you. He will bring people to plot against you. He will bring people to be able to discredit who you are and to what you stand for. Because why? Because the enemy will gather his accusations against you to destroy your reputation, for you to be discredited in the eyes of those around you. And he will conjure up lies and accusations. People will do the work of the enemy in these last days. Understand, when you want to stand for what is right, when you don't want to bow to the enemy, they will conjure up things and they will come up against you, because your enemies will be those of your own house and they will turn against you. So when people cannot control you, when you are in someone's house and they cannot control you, what do? That they want to come up against you. And that's how they discredit you. Because if they cannot control you, they will then bring accusations against you because they've not been able to control you. And this is what ends up happening many times. So in verses 20 and 21, Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the sovereign's prisoners were confined. And he was there in the prison. But Yahuwah was with Joseph and extended loving commitment to him. And he gave him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. Verse 23, the prison warden did not look into any point that was under Joseph's hand, because Yahuwah was with him. And whatever he did, Yahuwah made it prosper. So whatever he did, it prospered, because the Father was with Joseph. And the Father gave him favor. And so we're going to look at chapter 40. You know, if we look at, now we see how he was put in prison. Now Joseph, for a crime he doesn't commit, gets put in prison. And so when we have a look at Matthew chapter 24, let's have a look at Matthew chapter 24. Matthew chapter 24, verses 9 to 14, and it says, Then they shall deliver you up to affliction and kill you, and you shall be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many shall stumble, and they shall deliver up one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall raise up, and lead many astray. And because of the increase in lawlessness, the love of many shall become cold. But he who shall endure to the end shall be saved. And so you see, brother's going to turn against brother, and they are going to hate you for his name's sake, and they are going to have us thrown in jail. And so if we go look at Revelation chapter 2, in Revelation chapter 2 from verses 8 to 11, and this is the church of Smyrna, and the church of Smyrna says, This says the first and the last, who became dead and came to life. I know your works and pressure and poverty, yet you are rich. And the blasphemy of those who say they are Yehudim and are not, but are a congregation of Hasatan. Do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. See, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison in order to try you, and you shall have pressure 10 days. Be trustworthy until death, and I shall give you the crown of life. So understand, Joseph was also tried. Joseph was also put under pressure. Yahushua was also arrested. He was also put into prison. Then he was scourged. He was scourged, and he was beaten. And then he was hung at the stake. And so all of this is going to be testing and trialing. So he's going to go through the test. He's going to go through the trial. Joseph is going to be tested. Joseph is going to be tried. Joseph is going to be thrown into prison. Joseph has been thrown into prison. And so was Yahushua thrown into prison. And so shall we have pressure 10 days. And many of us will be thrown in prison because brother is going to be turned against brother. And we are going to have many that are going to come up against us and throw us in prison. And so we must understand that these things are going to come. And so when we're going to look at Genesis chapter 40, and in Genesis chapter 40 from verses 1 to 3, and after these events it came to be that the cupbearer and the baker of the sovereign of Mitzrayim sinned against their master, the sovereign of Mitzrayim, and the Pharaoh was wroth, and his 2 officers, and the chief cupbearer and the chief baker so he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison, the place where Joseph was a prisoner. So now, Father will, even in the place where you think you are captive, even in the place where you are in prison, Father will still give you favor, and Father will line up people. Father will put people in that place where you need to be. He will put people in that place to be able to line things up for your destiny. So don't despise the place where you are. Don't despise where the Father's got you to be, because Father will line things up, even if it means that you have to be put in a prison to be able to meet up with the people that you need to meet up with in order to be able to thrust you forth into the destiny that Father has before you. And this is exactly what is going to happen with Joseph. And so from verses 8, we are going to see then both of them are going to have a dream. And so we each have dreamt a dream, and there is no one to interpret it. And Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to Allah? Relate them to me, please. So the cupbearer brings his dream, and he says, see, in my dream a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and its clusters brought forth grapes. And the Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and so I took the grapes and pressed them into the Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in the Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said to him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days, yet within 3 days Pharaoh is going to lift up your head and restore you to the place, and you shall put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, according to the former ruling when you were his cupbearer. Now, if we have a look at this, Yahushua is the vine. We are the branches. And he, after 3 days, he was resurrected for all those who are grafted into the vine. He is the original vine, and we are those branches that are being grafted in, and we are sapping from the blood from that grape juice. When we sit down, when we, like he says, unless you drink my blood and eat my body, you have no part in me. And so when he sat down at the table, he broke the bread and he says, eat. And we have to partake of the bread. We have to partake of the bread. So it's the bread and it is the wine. It is the bread and it is the purest grape juice. Yahushua gives us the purest grape juice. It was his blood that was shed for us. And he says, as often as you do this, do it in remembrance of me. So that when we break the bread and when we drink the wine, the grape juice, we are being reminded of what he has done for us. So he is the one who is this vine. He is the one who's going to give us this beautiful grape juice to be able to graft us back into that vine. And on the 3rd day, he was resurrected so that he could graft us into him. And so therefore, if we have a look at John chapter 15, let's go look at John chapter 15 when he says, I am the vine. So we go look at John chapter 15, and in John chapter 15 he says from verses 1, I am the true vine and my Father is the gardener. Every branch in me that bears no fruit. You see now there was fruit, it was blossoming, it was bearing fruit, because we need to bear fruit for the Father. He takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes. So he's going to make us sure that we bear fruit. He's going to make sure that we are to be able to be the fruit that is going to be able to bear fruit. And it's going to have to, and if it doesn't bear fruit, he prunes. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. So you see, he is the word, and as long as we are drinking from him and eating from him, the words that he gives us, then we are bearing fruit. Stay in me, and I stay in you. As the branch is unable to bear fruit of itself unless it stays in the vine, so neither you unless you stay in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who stays in me and I in him, he bears much fruit, because without me you are able to do naught. If anyone does not stay in me, he is thrown away as a branch and dries up. And they gather them and throw them into the fire, and they are burnt. If you stay in me, and my words stay in you, you shall ask whatever you wish, and it shall be done for you. So understand, we are to stay in that vine. He is the vine. So we are to drink from the cup that he has to give us, and we are to eat from the bread that he has to give us. So we are to drink from him, and we are to eat the bread, which is all the word that we are to be able to stay in. If you stay in me and my words stay in you, you shall have whatever you wish, and whatever is done for you. In this my Father is esteemed, that you bear much fruit, and that you shall be my taught ones. As the Father loved me, I have also loved you. Stay in my love. If you guard my commands, you shall stay in my love, even as I have guarded my Father's commands and stayed in his love. These words I have spoken to you, so that my joy might be in you, and that your joy might be complete. This is my covenant, that you love one another as I have loved you. So do you see, brother must not turn against brother. Brother must love one another. Brother must embrace one another. So everything of John chapter 15 is tied into this Torah portion. This is my command, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, than one should lay down his life for his friends. So why didn't his brothers lay down their lives for him? You are my friends if you do whatever I command you. So we are to stay in the Father's command. So you see, what did Joseph do? Joseph stayed in the Father's commands. Joseph did not go sleep with Potiphar's wife, because Joseph feared Yahuwah. Verse 16, I did not choose you, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he might give you. These words I command, so that you love one another. If the world hates you, you know that they hated me, it hated you. So you see, his brothers hated him. Why? Because he was going to be one that was going to represent Yahushua. And just as they hate Yahushua, they are going to hate us. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they shall persecute you too. If they guarded my word, they guard yours too. But all this they shall do to you because of my name, because they do not know him who sent me. If I had come and spoken to them, they would have no sin. But now they have no excuse for their sin. He who hates me hates my Father as well. If I did not do them the works which no one else did, they would have not sinned. But now they have both seen and have both me and my hated both me and my Father. And this is what is going on in this nation. But that the word might be filled, which was written in their Torah, they hated me without a cause. So you see, why did they hate Joseph? Also because his father loved him. It was jealousy. It was all about jealousy. Why did Cain hate Abel? It was jealousy. But that word might be fulfilled, which was written in their Torah, they hated me without a cause. And when the Helper comes, which I shall send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth who comes from the Father, he shall bear witness of me. But you also bear witness, because you have been with me from the beginning. So you see, we are called to bear witness to Yahushua. And then if we have a look at Genesis chapter 40, from verses 16, and now this starts to talk about the baker. And so now from verses 16, the baker also has a dream, and the chief baker saw Genesis chapter 40 from verses 16. And the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good. And he said to Joseph, I also was in my dream, and saw 3 white baskets were on my head. And in the uppermost baskets all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, and the birds ate them out of the basket on my head. And Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 baskets are 3 days, yet within 3 days the Pharaoh is going to lift off your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds shall eat and your flesh from you. And on the 3rd day, the Pharaoh's birthday, it came to be that he made the feast for all the servants, and he lifted up his head, and the chief cupbearer and all the chief baker were among his servants. And then in verse 23, the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. So the chief baker was put to death, he was hung, and the chief baker was restored to his position. And so at the end of the day, if we go look at Matthew chapter 13, verses 3 to 4, let's go to Matthew chapter 13, verses 3 to 4. In Matthew chapter 13, verses 3 to 4, it says, and he spoke to them much in a parable, saying, see, the sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some indeed fell on the wayside, and the birds came and devoured them. And others fell on rocky places. So we see that the word, so let's go look at from the interpretation of this in verses Matthew chapter 13, verses 18 to 19, and it says, you then hear the parable of the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the rain and does not understand it, then the wicked one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. That is sown by the wayside. And that sown on rocky places, this is he who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. So understand, what is the seed that is sown? And this is now the baker had the bread on his head. So you see, this is the people that have all this head knowledge of the word. So they receive the word, but the word stays head knowledge in the word. They are the religious people that have head knowledge of the word. And the word comes, but immediately the enemy comes and snatches the word from them. And this is now what is going to land up happening. The baker carried the bread, the word, on his head, and he did not make a point of being grafted into the vine. But it is about the head knowledge. And the demons came and stole the word. So understand, the word that is in your mind, that is not being walked out in your life, you need to be grafted in. So when he sits down and he takes the cup, he says, you need to eat my flesh. You need to eat my word. My word needs to become part of your life, and you need to walk it out. And then you've got the word, and then you've got the cup that you drink. And this is again the word that we are drinking, the word that we are eating. But if the word just stays in our mind, in head knowledge, it's going to be stolen because it's not being walked out in our lives. And this is the revelation that the Father has given me. And so Yahushua, we know he is the bread of life. And so if we look at John chapter 6 verses 31 to 36, it tells us that Yahushua himself is the bread of life. He came to give us life, life in abundance. And when we eat his flesh and drink his blood, we do it in remembrance of him. So now we close off with the half Torah and Amos chapter 2. And so we're going to close off with Amos chapter 2, the half Torah. And here we are going to see where the Father is going to show us exactly what the problem is with us today. And we have a look and we see in Amos chapter 2 from verses 4 to 5, and it says, thus says Yahuwah, for 3 transgressions of Yehudah and 4 I do not turn it back, because they have rejected the Torah of Yahuwah and did not guard his laws, and their lies after which their fathers walked led them astray. So you see, what is it that is leading us astray? When we believe the lies and we do not come back to the truth of the Father's word, but instead we listen to people's words and the words that people speak, and we follow false prophets and false prophetic things, and we walk in these lies. And these things are going to lead us astray. But we don't want to guard his laws, guard his Torah, and walk in his ways. But I shall send fire upon Yehudah, and it shall consume palaces of Jerusalem. And this is exactly what's going to happen as we look at Zechariah chapter 13. 2/3 of this nation is going to be killed, and a third is going to go through the fire. Why? Because at the end of the day, they have all this head knowledge, just like the baker. They are doing all these religious things, outward manifestations, but at the end of the day, they don't walk the fullness. And the Father's looking for a remnant, one that is going to truly walk the fullness of His word. And so if we have a look at Amos chapter 2, verses 11 to 12, and it says, "And I raised up some of your sons as prophets, and some of your young men as Nazarites. Not so, O you children of Israel, declares Yahuwah. But you made the Nazarites drink wine, and commanded the prophets, saying, do not prophesy." So what do? And especially in this land with all their alcohol, and their alcohol, they defile the temple of Yahuwah. And so at the end of the day, they are profaning themselves. The prophets have become profane. The priests are profane. And it's profanity that is going on. And therefore, they don't want to listen to the truth of the word, and they don't want to walk by the truth of the word. And so then, if we have a look at Amos chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, and it says, "Hear this word that Yahuwah has spoken against you, O children of Israel, against the entire clan which I brought up from the land of Mitzrayim, saying, you alone have I known of all the clans of the earth. Therefore I punish you for all your crookednesses. Would two walk together without having met? Does a lion roar in the forest when he has no prey? Does a young lion give forth a voice out of its den unless he has caught?" Now listen to verse 6. "If a shofar is blown in a city, do the people not tremble?" My goodness, this is a land of where more and more the shofar is being blown. More and more a shofar is being blown. More and more a shofar right now is being blown. And yet, what is going on as the shofar is being blown? Do the people not tremble? If there is a calamity in a city, shall not Yahuwah have done it? For the Master Yahuwah does no matter unless He reveals His secret to His servants, the prophets. In the books of the prophets, everything has already been shown. In the books of the prophets, everything has already been prophesied. But people will carry on as if there is no books of the prophets. And this is the problem. This is the problem that is there. This is exactly the problem that is there. For the Master Yahuwah, it says that the shofar is being blown. And you know what? On the day of the ascension of Yahushua, there I stood on the top of the Mount of Olives, blowing the shofar, sounding the shofar for the King of glory to come. For the Master Yahuwah does no matter unless He reveals His secret to His servants, the prophets. And this is what the Father is going to do. The Father is going to be able to bring His prophetic utterances through the true prophets that will continue to speak the things that need to be spoken. And this is what He's going to do. And this is why the lion has roared. Who is not afraid? So the Lion of the tribe of Judah in this very nation is roaring. I have seen it in a vision. I have seen Yahushua as the Lion of the tribe of Judah on top of the old city, roaring for there to be able to be fear that needs to come. And the lion has roared. Who is not afraid? The Master Yahuwah has spoken. Who would not prophesy? And so at the end of the day, this is what the Father is doing in this hour. And this is His word. And so this is His Torah portion. And this is where right now the shofar is blowing. Yahushua is going to be able to give us His Ruach HaKodesh on the 28th of May. And this is what we are preparing for. So may Abba Yahuwah bless you all on this Shabbat. Let me just read the Aaronic blessing. Yevarechecha Yahuwah v'yishmerecha, Yair Yahuwah panav elecha, v'chunecha, Yisa Yahuwah panav elecha, v'yasem lecha shalom. Yahuwah bless you and keep you. Yahuwah make His face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahuwah lift up His countenance upon you and give you shalom. And so we pray for the peace of Jerusalem as we are in Jerusalem. And so we pray for the peace of Jerusalem because truly this place needs a lot of shalom. Shalom, shalom to you all.